Hi everyone, it's Tanya here. I've received feedback from a couple within the two groups that I work with indicating that the idea of writing an annotated bibliography is still giving you a little bit of stress. So I thought I'd talk through some of the rubric in an attempt to hopefully demystify things and also reassure you that you definitely have the capacity to do very well. If you haven't already done so, please make sure that you do watch my video on finding an article and also my videos on writing with integrity and on reading articles. Hopefully these particular resources will help you greatly in finding what you need and using it appropriately. Okay, so our annotated bibliography, that's really just a wordy way of saying a summary of readings. The word limit is 800 words, and now I know that if you are new to university study, and this is your first or second teaching period, 800 words may seem huge. It's not really, but I get that when you're starting out it can feel like such a large space to fill. I think you'll find that once you get started it's actually trickier to fit everything in within the 800 words rather than hard to fill the space. An important point though, please don't go over 880 words because if you do so, I can't mark anything beyond that 880 word point. The weighting is 10%. Now, I'm hopeful that this is going to reassure you. I think you've all got the capacity to do really well, but if things don't quite pan out as well as you hope with this particular assignment, it's not do or die. It's certainly possible to achieve a good overall mark, even if you don't do as well as you might like on this task. 10%, you can easily recover from that. I do encourage you, though, to put in as much as you can and do your very best. It'll give you a bit of a buffer. The assignment is due at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, the 18th of April. Please, please, please call out if life throws any barriers in your way and that due date is tricky. As an ELA in this unit, I can authorise an extension of up to 48 hours from the due date. If you are seeking a longer extension, you do need to apply online, and that goes through to the unit coordinator, Glenn. When you apply for an extension to me, make sure you put in as much information as possible. I need to know your full name. I need to know the name as listed in Grade Centre. I also need to know why you're looking for an extension to make sure that I'm being fair in awarding one, or not, just depending on the circumstances. Okay, so in a nutshell, this assessment task requires you to compile an annotated bibliography of 4 references that relate to a central topic provided in this assessment document. This is key. You need to make sure that you are on task with the central topic. So let's look down and see what that central topic is. Okay, so the topic is the 5-factor model of personality in relation to proactive coping amongst university students. Okay, so make sure any article you select covers the 5-factor model of personality, the construct of proactive coping, and the subjects or participants of university students. This is absolutely key. Make sure you don't get something that's kind of interesting but not really related. It's really important that you do use these 2 references as part of this process. So, as mentioned earlier, you need 4 references. 2 have been selected early for you or already for you. If I was going to tackle this assignment, I would actually start by finding this article here, and then I would write the annotation or the summary for this particular article, and then I would go on to the next one. What I'd also tend to do is I'd probably do this in chunks. So I might do one article one night, another article the next night, and so on. In that way, you'll give yourself time to really think things through, and it'll also be a much more manageable task. Now, there's some tricky inclusions in the assessment brief, and one of them's not quite accurate. Let's have a look. It says here, follow the format used in the annotated bibliography example We do want you to do that, but it also says to use a template. A template hasn't been provided, so that makes things a little bit trickier. So if you're looking for a template, don't panic. There's not a specific one, and I'm sorry that that's been mentioned in the assignment brief. It is a good idea, however, to look through a variety of resources that we have available, and there's a whole list here. There's also an example annotation, and you could certainly use that as a model for your response. So while we don't have a template as such, we do have an example you can model what you write on. There's also some more general resources and a video as well. So make sure you read all of these and watch all of these as required. Now, what's the criteria? There's assessment criteria as always. So we're looking at how relevant the sources are. So make sure you're choosing sources that are appropriate. So make sure it is about the 5-factor model of personality as it relates to proactive coping amongst university students. So those 3 things are the things you're looking for in that one article. If one of them's missing, move on to the next article. It's also important that you do make sure the sources you choose are credible. What does that mean? Well, in a nutshell, please make sure you use academic journals. Some additional information on credibility. It's absolutely essential that you make sure that the source is current. So generally speaking, that means published within the last 5 years, although there can be variations between units. We also look at the annotations that you make. We're looking at APA referencing and language, grammar and proofing. Okay? It's important to look at the weighting of the criteria as well. For example, relevance of sources and credibility of sources make up 30% of your mark for this assignment. That's a fair chunk. So if you invest some time in selecting the right or good articles, you're already well on your way to picking up some really good marks on this response. Just a further point about the subject of credibility. I mentioned that generally speaking, look for something published in the last 5 years. In this instance, we will be happy if it's post-2010. It's also important to make sure that you use peer-reviewed journals as well. Academic journals, an absolute must. Then there is 40% allocated to annotations. There's 15% allocated to APA formatting. So it's really important to give this a good go. And we also look at language, grammar and proofreading as well. Now, I know a few of you have said to me that you're a little bit worried about your capacity to write at a university level. From what I've seen so far, I'm not worried about the capacity of any of you. I think you've all got some wonderful skills that you can certainly build on. But if you are feeling a little bit shaky in that area, make sure you draw on additional supports. For example, there's Smart Thinking, there's your tutor. We have student advisors. So there are a variety of internal and related supports you can draw on, but there are other strategies you can use as well. I know that when I write something and then I read it immediately after I've written it, I normally miss any spelling or grammatical errors that have crept in. So what I do where possible is I would write something, set it aside and then come back the next day with some fresh eyes. Reading work out aloud can also be a really good way to work out whether things sound okay, because if they don't sound okay, it's likely that there might be some grammatical errors in there as well. Consider using a critical friend as well, preferably not someone in this course because you may place yourself at risk of being involved in a plagiarism case. But see if there's a friend or a family member who will look at your work and give you feedback. They'll be able to tell you whether or not it makes sense. They might be able to also point out some grammatical errors that you've missed as well, or some spelling errors. Guys, as I mentioned before, I know that some of you are feeling really nervous. I'm actually feeling quite confident in your capacity, but I'm hoping that this information has helped give you a better sense of what's required. I'm also hoping that if you have any questions, and I mean any at all, that you will let me know. This is all about conversation. It's about sharing. It's about developing our understanding together. All right, guys, thanks for listening. We'll chat shortly in the discussion board.